Hello and welcome to another T2 Hubcast with me, James Cooper.
And me, Bernice Casserly.
How are you, Bernice?
I'm very well, how are you?
Yeah, very good. So what are we talking about in this podcast then?
So today we are going to explore print.
Print? What are you talking about? What's print?
Print is this fantastic model that we use with a lot of our clients. It's something that I think can be really enlightening to a lot of people.
All right.
So I suppose if we start off by really exploring kind of what is it, and also as well, I suppose, why we use it at T2.
Okay. So first thing I'd like to say on print, because obviously we use it as a really good foundation for, and when I say it's changed my life, it really has. I've got my missus printed and everybody else that needs to. So, but where does that sit within sort of T2 and how we introduce it? So really, where does this sit within the human iceberg model that we use at T2, Bernice?
So a lot of the work that we do, so we work with managers, leaders at all sorts of different levels from all sorts of different backgrounds as well. And it's really important when it comes to leadership and being the best leader for your people. It's really important that you understand yourself first. So we refer to it as you need to understand how to lead yourself before you can lead others. So what we explore with our clients, with our partners as well, anyone that we're working with, is we explore a model that we call the human iceberg. So if you think about human behavior, so how we behave, we all behave in different ways, but we behave for different reasons, So if you think of an iceberg, let's say, so an iceberg, typically on average, you can only see 1/9 of an iceberg above water. Okay. We like to refer to this as human behavior. So for example, that tip of the iceberg, what is visible and what is above the waterline, it's your traits, it's your characteristics and those standard behaviors, and that's what you see, stuff that you hear, and it's really important to have understanding of all of that. But when you explore and really look at behavioral models or psychometric testing tools, what they do is they tell you just that, the tip of the iceberg stuff, which is how you behave. And yes, that is really insightful, but it sometimes isn't always impactful.
So when we talk about the above the waterline behaviours, characteristics and traits, I like to say that as how we show up, right?
Yeah, it's how you show up.
Okay, but when we're talking from a print context then?
Yes.
Where are we now? Are we above the waterline or are we underneath?
Oh, we're below.
Okay, we're below the waterline. Yes. I like that. Okay. So does everybody, especially when we're talking about print, does everybody relate to this information straight away, or what sort of process are they following, and how does it work?
Not always, but when it comes to self-development, a lot of people either go out and seek it because they want to understand themselves, they want to be a better human.
Growth mindset, right?
Sorry?
Growth mindset.
Definitely.
Okay.
Some people, though, it might be that their organisation, the company that they've worked for, is booked at a fantastic company like T2, and it's given to them. So, again, some people might not always be kind of open to it, because this stuff really does take it to the next level. Because when you think about print in regards to the human iceberg, it's below the waterline. So it's the why of you. It's the reason why you behave the way that you do. It's the reason why you think the way that you think. It's the why you feel the way that you feel. And again, sometimes it can be unconscious and it's not something that is visible. So for example, if I'm working with you, James, and I've never done anything like print before, I don't know what's driving your above the waterline behaviors, or what makes you do things in a certain way or think or feel things a certain way. All I can try and understand is what I see and what I hear. So what
I show you, right?
Yes, definitely.
Okay, so where does print come from then? Because we've said print, but where's this all Where is it from? What's it about? Yes,
so print was developed by a gentleman called Paul Hertz and Deborah Levine back in 1998. So Paul Hertz was following the work of Dr. Edwards Deming and really exploring what can we do to really help an organisation break through what they call the productivity ceiling.
Okay, what's a productivity ceiling, Bernice?
So productivity ceiling is, if you look at Deming, for example, so he is known for for being a fantastic person to really change that level of productivity in regards to streamlining systems and processes.
Okay.
But actually what they found was, or what Paul Hertz found, is you can go into an organization and completely revamp and change how they do things.
Yep.
If there's any dysfunction within a team, within the people, then that's going to have a significant impact to not only how productive they are.
Yep.
If they aren't productive, then the likelihood is that they're not high performing.
Okay. So then what off the back of what Edwards Deming did or started, what was Paul Hertz and Deborah Levine's input on that then?
So what they were doing is Paul was obsessed with the reason why. So what they were doing is they were looking at working with organizations, and where they were finding that the people weren't as productive as they should be, they were starting to explore the behavioral side. And that's what Paul Hertz was really interested. For years, the sole thing that was driving him was why. Because what he was doing is he was running all sorts of different psychometrics on different people in different organizations, but it was simply telling people how they behave. So, and what he found is that it wasn't always, I suppose, it wasn't given the impact needed, and it wasn't driving any kind of progress or change. And this is what he was then passionate in finding, the why. Well, why do people behave the way that they do? Because that's what's really important here.
Okay. So if we start to look at the process, and we've got other podcasts on the actual process of print, but what is the system that you have to follow? Now, we've both done print.
Yes.
So what was your experience of it?
So I did print a few years ago now. I don't really remember actually completing the survey.
Okay.
But when it comes to completing the survey, so every single one of us has a completely different experience, because what it's doing is it's a very smart, very sophisticated survey, and there's a very clever algorithm that sits behind it. So every single one of us, so we will begin the survey and we'll be asking or answering certain questions.
How many is the first one that everybody answers?
16.
Right, okay. So I've got to answer 16 questions,
Yes,
that will say.
you do.
Okay.
And that's it. First bank of questions is the same for all of us. What then happens is, based on that first set of answers, the survey will then fire off a different set of questions. So this is where that experience then starts to differ between different people.
Okay.
And what that survey is doing is there's a potential of 750 questions. Now, I'm sure, James, if I sat you in this room and I gave you 750 questions to answer, it would probably take you quite some time, right?
Yeah, I'm not doing it in the 15 minutes it took me to do my print survey.
No, definitely not. And it is on average 15 minutes. For some people, it can be even quicker than that. For some people, it can take even longer than that. And the reason being is because that survey will not stop until it has 100% validated your answers. And this is why for some people as well, some people get a little bit frustrated because the survey might ask them a question and then it might reword it, because what it's doing is it will not stop until it's 100% guaranteed and validated.
Your unconscious motivators.
Definitely.
Right. Okay then. So when we talk about unconscious motivators, and once you've done the survey, now I know from some of the experiences we've had in workshops where people have been and they've gone, well, that I don't necessarily relate to these unconscious motivators.
Yeah.
But then once they read the profile and once we get into the detail of it and go through some of the language that we're going to cover in a second, then people start to understand and go,
yes,
okay,
yeah,
that all makes sense now. Let's talk about the difference between the print survey and some of the other ones that are around and some of the other psychometric testing. Now, I was a skeptic.
Yeah.
I was the person, because I've been in education for a while. We've done leadership styles and learning styles, and really coming to the conclusion that we need a blend. When we're talking about print, what's the difference between this print to survey and the Paul Hertz and Deborah Levine model that they released in 1998, or maybe some of the others? No, we're talking about above the waterline behaviours, characteristics and traits, dropping it lower, under the waterline or beneath the waterline, to then actually have the impact on unconscious motivators. So what are these unconscious motivators then, Bernice? And I don't know if we're not going to go into so much detail, because I think there'd be a deep dive into each one of them. But just across the top of the board, how many is there? Which ones are best? Which ones are worst? And if, like I say, you'll tell me the difference, right? So let's just get into the detail. So as far as I know, there's 9 unconscious motivators.
There is 9 unconscious motivators, and just kind of tying back into what you just said there about what makes print different is because it's all about unconscious motivators. So it's not a behavioral model, it's a model based on motivations. And as the Paul Hertz group describe it, is unconscious motivators get to the heart of why we behave as we do when certain things happen or occur in our lives. So it's our unconscious motivators that are responsible for our thoughts, for our feelings, for our actions, because they operate at that deeper level.
And from a T2 point of view, though, then the people come in and go, you're going to tell me how I behave based on a couple of questions. Well, unfortunately, or fortunately for us, that's not the case, and it is an unconscious motivators profile.
Yes.
We don't tell you how you act.
No.
And neither does the Paul Hertz group don't.
No.
You're the guy, the people that come to the workshops and the people that obviously put themselves into the print system. If you're being your authentic self and you've gone with your gut, if we like to say, then they are going to be your unconscious motivators.
Yeah. And I think when it comes to the unconscious motivators, again, that's what's driving the above the waterline behavior. So I suppose our listeners listening to this podcast now, I'm sure if you have done psychometric tests before, for some of those tools, if we were to ask you, can you tell us or explain to us what that told you about yourself? The amount of people that I've asked that question to, and they say, oh, I can't really remember, let me try and think what it said I was, which shows that it didn't have an impact. And also, as well as you said earlier, sometimes it can be situational in regards to that above the waterline behaviour and how we behave. So unconscious motivators, it's the why of you.
Yeah, so understanding when they've been formed, right?
Yes.
So if we said from the age of roughly, and don't go pinpoint, but really from the age of 4 to 24, 25, that sort of mid-20s, if you like, that's where you're forming, you're becoming your authentic, if you're being yourselves and not necessarily, being your authentic self, then you would be forming the way that you react to certain things based on the experiences that you have.
Yeah.
So that is then forming your unconscious motivators and how different situations, different communications are obviously impacting your potential or anticipated behaviour above the waterline.
Yeah, so your unconscious motivators, typically it's your first 25 years, I suppose, isn't it?
Okay.
So anywhere between 4 and 24. So I like to describe it, it's where you're building your own kind of map of the world and your lens of the world. And what makes human beings fantastic and unique is that we all see the world in different ways.
Yeah.
That's our unconscious motivators. So your unconscious motivators are formed based on the experiences that you have during those formative years. That's what kind of drives them. And this is what makes print different. People often say to us, well, does it ever change? Often it doesn't, unless something significant has happened in your life that's completely impacted the way that you view the world and your map of the world. That's the only time that we see your unconscious motivators change.
We're talking about big stuff, right?
Big stuff,
okay, so
life-changing stuff for some
it could
people.
And again, touching back on sense of purpose, that if it is something that impacts your sense of purpose, then that could potentially change the unconscious motivators. From a human iceberg point of view, and for everybody that hasn't seen the human iceberg model, you've got the where, which is your sense of purpose.
Yeah.
Where does it all come from? You've got then, but still below the waterline, but in the probably the biggest part of the human iceberg, you've got the why of you, your unconscious motivators, and then the impact of that, and you follow the thread right the way through from your where right the way up to then traits, characteristics, and behaviours.
Yeah.
Now, let's think about that as a point, a touch point. If we're trying to make the thread right the way through the human iceberg, what are the unconscious motivators then, Bernice?
So, suspense. There's 9 of them.
Is that dum-dum?
Dum-dum. Let me tell you. So there's 9 unconscious motivators. They're numbered 1 to 9. Reason being, that's simply just for reference. Does not mean that 1's better than 9 or 9's better than 1. It simply is just to make it nice and easy for us to remember. One thing that we do often say to people when they do print with us is that what it doesn't tell you anything about how skilled you you are or anything about how competent you are as a human being. It simply is, what are your unconscious motivators that's driving that above the waterline behaviour?
Okay, so if I've done my maths correctly,
Yeah.
so 9 unconscious motivators, you get 2, don't you?
You do.
So that would then say that there's 72 different combinations.
There is, yes.
Okay, and again, if we go back to the same principle, there is no combination that's better than any other.
Nope.
What about if I'm in a certain role? Is there a better profile for me to be CEO or?
No, what is interesting with the work that we do, so we work with managers and leaders, we do tend to see certain combinations do kind of show up in certain roles. And that's where I get really excited, because it shows that that person clearly has found a career, found a path, found a journey that actually really connects to their inner purpose. That's where I get really excited. But also, that said, is we do sometimes meet people who maybe they're not in their what print refers to as best self. They're not the best positive, productive version of themselves. And the likelihood is that maybe there's something within their job role that's actually impacting or their unconscious motivators, and their unconscious motivators aren't being met and satisfied. So part of the print report, it even gives people a section where they can actually complete a little kind of questionnaire that asks them questions about their role, and that's really useful to a lot of people.
That's that role alignment document,
definitely,
isn't it?
It definitely is interesting because, we're probably going
right. So we can meet our unconscious motivators at work. We can obviously sometimes some people maybe don't meet their unconscious motivators at work. So for the number of times that we've delivered print, and we do it quite a bit, it is a really big part of what we do at T2. Because obviously we're trying to lead ourselves first before we start looking towards others, and then the team and all the other pillars that we have at T2. So what's if I was to say to you, Bernice, what's the key takeaways that I need to remember from my print profile that I need to really understand, I need to get nailed on? Because if I don't understand this process and the language that's used in print, and we've had organisations that have changed the whole way that they talk, because of the print, because that's when we talk about impact. Well, there's no better feeling than having a full team of people embrace their print, embrace the language that we're going to go through now, and then change or maybe adapt the way that they speak to each other.
Because it can have a significant impact to a team, to an organisation, because if you have that awareness of not only yourself but how others are wired, it means that you're able to adapt and better understand those people, and by doing so, that's where we break through that productivity ceiling.
Right, okay then.
So if we think about how unconscious motivators work, so it's really quite simple. So how we behave one way when our unconscious motivators are being met and satisfied, and when this happens, the Paul Hertz group refer to it as it's your best self behavior, and it's anticipated as well. So in the report, so you get a full page that talks around your unconscious motivators and your anticipated best self.
This is the easy read, right?
Yeah, everyone loves reading this page, and we always say, people, if we're doing this with a group and they're in the room with us, we always throw some highlighters around, say highlight the bits that really stand out to you, and everyone gets the highlighter and says, you know what, I'm going to highlight the whole page because that person is absolutely awesome.
A couple of times, right?
But dum.
There we go.
If your unconscious motivators aren't being met, aren't being satisfied, or there's something that's blocking them from being satisfied, then there is potential for some shadow behaviour to shine through.
What's shadow behaviour?
So potential shadow behaviour. This is where I suppose it's the most unproductive version of you.
Okay.
So if you think of those days at work, maybe you've had a day at work and just all sorts of different things have been happening, and it's just been one of those days where it's just been really difficult, and you're probably aware that there's certain behaviours that people have seen from you that maybe weren't productive. Okay? The likelihood is that there was something happened or happening that was actually blocking your unconscious motivators from being met and satisfied. And this is where you see almost like a different version of you, and sometimes you look back on that and you think, oh my goodness, I probably didn't deal with that situation the right way. The likelihood is that there was something going on there, and we refer to this as triggers.
Right, so triggers then.
Yes.
So my question is, so trigger for me is like in a gun, okay, where someone pulls the trigger,
Yeah.
and they start to see something different to what they'd normally see.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, my point is, if I start thinking of triggers and shadow behaviour, so can I be triggered into best self?
Well, typically no. So
Okay.
it's typically a trigger happens, and that is an action or non-action by another person, by a situation, and that's what stimulates shadow behavior.
Okay, so I am triggered into shadow behaviour then, is that what we're trying to say?
Yes.
Okay, and then how do I get, if I've been triggered into shadow behaviour, and if I'm starting to act in these ways that potentially are not necessarily the way I'd want to react,
Yeah.
what's then the term to get me back into anticipated best self behaviour then?
So this is where, with a lot of the clients and partners that we work with, we focus on actually building strategies.
Nice.
So it's really important that, not only do you have this report and it tells you kind of these are some of the triggers that may impact your unconscious motivators. This is the potential of shadow behavior that you might see. It's really important that we don't just stop it there, because it's really, we want to make sure that everyone that we work with leaves with having a significant impact from this. So this is where we talk to people and really get them exploring those triggers. So what is the top trigger that just from reading it on your report, that instantly, like, almost your heart rate starts going and you feel a certain emotion? It's really important to then really think about, well, what shadow behavior might people see from me? And then actually, what can I do differently to try and be more best self? Because that's what we want. The art of print is it gives you all of that awareness on triggers, on shadow, but also as well helps you tie the knots so that you can try and be more best self. That's the goal. That's what we want. So we can have awareness on how we can better manage those triggers so that we can be the best version of us.
Okay, so shadow behaviour then. If I'm triggered in, you're going to do a bit of coaching with me now, Bernice.
Oh, am I?
So if I've been triggered,
Yes.
is that my fault?
Well, this is sometimes a little bit debatable, but it's not your fault. It's your fault, and your responsibility is how you react to that trigger.
Right. Okay. So
a lot of triggers you can't control because they just happen. And also as well, this is where you have to really take a step back and remember that we are all unique.
Yeah.
We're all kind of special and wonderful in our own little ways, but we view the world differently. So it's really important that I need to be aware that me in my best self, there might be, if I'm wired completely different to you, James, some of my best traits or my best qualities may actually be one of your triggers.
Right. So hold it there then. So me being me and you being you.
Yeah.
Could be triggering each other into shadow behaviour.
Yes, and this is why sometimes we have dysfunction in a team, because people aren't able to understand each other's lens of the world.
Okay, so then the strategy is then put in place. So maybe I'm just listening to you, Bernice, I'm just listening to your words. So the two things that we need to really get across is that you are triggered into shadow behaviour.
Yeah.
And you strategy into best self behaviour.
Yes.
Okay, so remember, potential shadow behaviour is the actual strapline.
Yeah.
And anticipated best self behaviour is the other one.
Yes.
Okay, but you are triggered into shadow, you strategy into best.
Yes.
Cool. Right. I've got a little bit of clarity there. So first of all, we know our unconscious motivators, but for anybody that's listening to this, they're going, all right, you've said there's 9, but what are they?
Yes.
So let's just go across the top and we're not going to dive into each one, but when you start to listen to the podcast and listen it back, and you might have to listen to this part a few times if you haven't been on one of the print workshops or the Leading Yourself workshop at T2, is actually, what are these 9 unconscious motivators? And then if we can give a little bit of context and just go through ours so people can start to see what it might look like for them. But for everybody that's listening, as we're going through these 9 unconscious motivators, I want you to just see if there's any that might resonate with you. And this is only there's a very limited amount of detail, but just understand there is going to be deep dives on each one of these.
Yes.
So let's get into it now, Bernice. What is a 1 profile?
So 1 is for things to be perfect, correct, and right.
It's ABC, right?
A, B, C.
A, B, C, D, E, F, G. A, B, F, D, E, A. Excuse me?
So these are the people who will often seek to avoid making mistakes. They don't want to do things wrong. They live in a world where they like everything to be nice and structured, organised.
Okay.
Everything's nice and orderly as well, because for them, they're wired for things to be perfect, correct and right.
Okay, 2 profile.
2 is to be needed and appreciated. So this is the most humanistic of all unconscious motivators. One thing that we do always say with this one, so the language there, to be needed and appreciated. One thing we do like to say, it doesn't necessarily mean that this is a needy person. It simply means that this is someone who's really thinking of others, always putting other people before themselves as well. Really caring, supportive people.
Okay, so we've got perfect, correct and right, 1.
Yep.
2, to be needed and appreciated.
Yes.
3.
3 is to succeed and achieve. Ooh. Really goal-driven, really fast-paced. They're very passionate. They're very energetic. They love to have a goal. This is the person who is always continuously working towards goals, and they love it. They thrive when they're able to accomplish those goals. And we like to think of them as they're the captain of winning teams.
Okay, cool. So perfect, correct and right. To be needed and appreciated.
Yes.
To succeed and achieve.
Yes.
4.
4 is to be special and find meaning in life. Ooh. So these are the people where I suppose they're out of the box thinkers. This is the one unconscious motivator that in the work that we do, we don't see so often. But that said, it definitely shows up in certain roles. So these are the people who are really, really creative. There's no limit to the possibilities in their world. And they like to have find that meaning behind things. So 4, to be special and find meaning in life.
Okay, 5.
5 is to be knowledgeable and smart. So these are the people who love to be, their world is knowledge is power, and they thrive on being in situations where they can soak up and get all of the information. And that's how they make decisions as well.
Okay. 6.
6 is to be safe and secure. So these are the people who, they are the people who, in a group, or let's say in the work context, this is the person in your team who will be able to look right forwards further than anyone else can and be able to pick out all of the potential risks in a situation. Yeah. Because in their world, they're wanting to be safe and secure.
So they can find the pitfalls, right?
Yes, definitely. Okay. They'll always find the pitfalls behind things.
Okay, cool. All right. What about a 7 then? Last 3.
7, to enjoy life and be happy.
Lovely.
So these are the positive, optimistic people. They just want to enjoy their life and just have a good time.
And that can-do attitude is normally pretty good to touch on. Okay, cool. 8.
8 is strong and self-reliant. So these are the people who are seen as incredibly independent, but also as well, one thing to add to that is strong and self-reliant. So can sometimes be a bit of bravery, a bit of they're very courageous. They're able to jump into tough situations and be able to step up not only for themselves but for other people as well.
Now,
so great protectors of others.
Yeah, as an impact of that, that would be if you're stepping up for me.
Yeah.
I'm then starting to feel a little bit more protected by the decisions that you make, because I know you're making the decisions for me.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, cool. And then finally, last but by no means least,
of course,
the 9 profile.
9 is to have peace and harmony.
Oh.
Yeah.
Nice.
So these are the people who we like to consider them as they're the glue that holds the group together. Okay, so in their world, they just want to have peace and harmony.
Okay.
Let's all just get along and just no conflict.
So let's round that off then. So we've got the 1 to 9 profiles, and just understand that they are not numbers, they are profiles. Okay.
Yeah.
And that's just the easiest way to organise them. Now, if I then said, well, okay, I get 2 of these, but which one is the most dominant or the most prominent, if you like?
Yeah. So when you get your print report, the very first page is going to tell you what your unconscious motivators are, but it's going to tell you which is the major. Yep. So that is the most dominant, and which is your minor, which is your secondary. Okay.
So what about the relation between those 2 then? What do I need to know about? Because obviously if I'm a 2-3 high.
Yep.
Now, I want to know what that means.
So you're 2-3, to be needed and appreciated, to succeed and achieve. For me, I'm a 7-8, to enjoy life and be happy and to be strong and self-reliant.
So my 3 to succeed and achieve, and I've got my 2, which is my major. But because their relation is high, what impact does my 3 have? So is it to support my major and get my unconscious motivators met? And then on the flip side of that, if I flip the coin, if you like, that when I'm in shadow behaviour, my 3 would then potentially show a bit of shadow, so that then I am then not going to meet my unconscious motivators because it still keeps pushing and pushing and pushing.
Yep.
Okay, so with a low relation between the two, so between your major and your minor, then it is, from what you've just said, is that then if that first horse over the finishing line is getting supported or maybe even sometimes hindered by your minor, because obviously it will work either as a superpower or there's maybe a little bit of a kryptonite. Is that the way, like a way of looking at it?
It can do, but something that Paul Hertz and Deborah Levine, who created print, they actually answered this question themselves, and they said, to be honest, in certain situations it's different to different people. Although for me it's low, there is certain situations where that isn't the case, and it might be that the potential shadow you see from me is connected to my 7 or is connected to my 8, and this is where it is your print report, your print profile is so unique to you. So this is where for people it might be that they can really recognize certain aspects of it in themselves, but there may be certain aspects of it, especially in the potential shadow, that they don't necessarily connect with. And this is where the true self development comes from, being able to, we have it in certain situations where people read their potential shadow behavior page. And the reason why the Paul Hertz group called it potential shadow is because there's potential for it. And also as well, the most kind of self-aware people, they can look at situations that trigger them and they can create those strategies. So this is where for some people, they'll read the shadow behavior page and they'll say, you know what, that was me 20 years ago, 10 years ago, 5 years ago. And actually, but because of experience, or I've learned I'm a better person now, I know how to better manage that situation.
And they've definitely put the strategies in place to deal with that.
And that's what we're aiming to do. And that's what print can do for you as well. It can open your eyes to really explore that potential shadow. But this is where every single client that we work with, we will make sure that they leave with a strategy in place so that they can be more best self.
For at least their top trigger, right? They're at least their top trigger.
Definitely top trigger.
So, just to sort of round those off and understanding language, let's sort of round it up beneath. So we know who the Paul Hertz group are.
Yeah.
We know it's Paul Hertz and Deborah Levine.
Yes.
We've been through the 9 unconscious motivator profiles very briefly, but understand that if anybody's listening to the podcast, you can start to make a link between maybe some of them. But remember, the key word is unconscious.
Yes.
We've had people in T2 Towers that have literally gone, I didn't make the link.
No.
That's absolutely fine, by the way. It's absolutely fine. The key word is unconscious.
Yeah.
People don't have necessarily the links.
And it's our job to use print as the model to make the unconscious into the conscious mind so that you can be that best version of you.
Okay, so let's round it up in a human iceberg context. So we've got above waterline, potential shadow behaviours, anticipated best self behaviours. They're what you will show above the waterline.
Yes.
Your unconscious motivators and the why you act the way you do, the why of you, is sat beneath the waterline in a human iceberg context. And then below that, and what we touch on as well, is your sense of purpose.
Yeah.
Now, this isn't a counselling session, is it, Bernice?
No.
So this is a development session.
Yes.
So even if that sense of purpose comes from quite a dark place, we don't necessarily, and I know I definitely don't ask people unless they have this burning hole in the middle of their chest and they need to speak about it, then we won't touch on sense of purpose. But really, it's about understanding that, okay, I've boxed that off. I've put that into the back of my brain. I've had that conversation with myself. I don't need to open that box. We're not asking you to open the box.
No.
We're just asking you to understand that that's your sense of purpose. It's in there. And this is then the impact that it could potentially have on the reason you've got the unconscious motivators you do.
Yeah.
And then the anticipated or potential for the impact on behaviour above the waterline.
Yeah.
Okay. Key language we need to understand. Shadow behaviour. You are triggered into shadow. Use strategy into best self. Anticipated best self. Potential shadow. All these terms, everybody, that you need to, if you're going to change the language and how it impact and that, like I say about maximising impact, you understand that, people are being triggered into shadow.
Yeah.
And I am doing something. I'm making a choice. I'm controlling what I control to get myself into anticipated best self behaviours.
Yeah, you can't always get away from some of those triggers. As we said earlier as well, sometimes what might be triggering for someone is that other person, they're in their true best self.
That's the way of working.
So it's down to you. It's your responsibility to manage how you show up. And that comes from that deep understanding of actually how you're wired and how you work.
Oh, so you mean I can't just turn up and say, "Oh, you've triggered me now, that's it."
No.
That's leave me for a week.
That's not productive, James.
Oh.
So I suppose if anyone is listening to this and maybe you haven't done print before, then of course that's something that we use a lot at T2.
Yeah.
So if anyone is a little bit curious by print, or it might be that actually you really want to understand your print, because not only is it effective for your professional work life, but there's so much you can take away from it in regards to your personal life as well.
Yeah.
So, James, if anyone does want to find out a little bit more about their print, what do they need to do?
So you guys need to get in touch with the T2 Towers.
Yeah.
Send an email, follow us on social media. What we are going to do is we are going to do the deep dive into your unconscious motivators, but without you actually going through the process.
Yeah.
And actually getting in touch with T2, you're going to get a little bit of a miscommunication, or you might even get maybe a little bit of ambiguity by assuming that you're getting it. And
we always get people to guess. When we introduce the unconscious motivators to a client or to a group, if we're doing coaching session, a workshop, whatever it might be. So the amount of people that make a guess, and sometimes it's maybe they're not far off.
Yeah.
So definitely have a think about which of those motivators stand out to you and which you think you can connect with. But I would definitely recommend, if you really want to take it to the next level in regards to your self-development, whether it be for you as an individual or for your team, for your organisation, then get in touch, because we would love to help support.
Okay. Bernice, it's been a pleasure.
Always.
And we'll be back for the next T2 Hubcast. Thank you very much. I'm James Cooper.
And I'm Bernice Casserly.
Are you a fan of our podcast? If so, make sure you're following us on all of our social media channels. You can find us on TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn, and Twitter by searching Trans2 Performance. By following us, you'll have access to exclusive content, special announcements, and more. Join the T2 community today.